I have never really liked transitions. I'm one of those people who likes to find his space and stay there. And yet somehow I have chosen a life with lots of transition and have never really gotten good at it. On the other hand, it's always been good for me. And after the fact, I tend to rise to the occasion. I will tell you that something happens to me every time I stay still for too long. There's a sense that static nature does not suit me, that I need more, that growing, that evolving, that moving on has always in some ways served me. But you have to marry somebody who is not like you, who loves to change scenery, change her life, change my life, and votes for transformation and transition regularly. It does not always make for easy dialogue, but in the end, it has never proven wrong. When I was younger, I tried to understand how this kid from Detroit, who was very security-oriented, would ever get out of Detroit, because I always knew I should not be in Detroit. That whatever my ambitions were, dreams were, they were not to be fulfilled in that space. I always thought, as I've probably told you many times, that I belonged in New York and wanted to get to New York. And I did, as soon as I was of age and graduated high school, and actually 2 years of school in Detroit, which were my last sort of, my last moment realizing I was in the wrong place. New York happened. And then in New York, I had all these moments to be deeply secure. And every time I found myself deeply secure, something came, often from within, that said, move on. So I've never understood that part of me. I've never understood the part of me that was willing to take risks, because it's not built in. It comes from something beyond me. It says, don't settle. There's more out there. I remember when my friend Barry offered me LSD, every part of my Detroit nature said, are you crazy? Why would I do something like that? But all I wanted to do was do it. And then when I did it, I realized everything I thought about life and the world was wrong, that I had completely misinterpreted the universe that I lived in, and I didn't know what to do about it. But my first instinct was to go back to get a job, work, lock in. And I went to NBC, and I went to NBC News, and I worked there in the film department, editing film and news film, and I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. It was a secure job, and trust me, my parents could not understand how I would give up something that secure, but I decided I'm going to go to India. I'm going to find a teacher. And I blew up NBC. I just said goodbye. They were very proud of me. I've told this story a lot, but the entire news division took me to lunch to say goodbye, and I could feel every one of them wished they were me. They were leaving NBC. And then I went to India. I looked for teachers, did not find them, met a lot of remarkable people, came back to America, and was sad that I had failed in my journey to find a teacher. I'm carrying Tibetan carpets to a store on 7th Avenue that I used to know about with Soul Oriental Art. I was going to get some money for these Tibetans I lived with in Kathmandu. And I meet Rudy. The story goes, I'm sorry if this is boring, but that night, I believe, my friends George and Cheryl said, do you want to meet a girl? I said yes. I had in fact said to God very directly, bring me a girl. And And that night, I believe the night I met Rudy, Blanche walked into my life. That was 52 years ago, and we will celebrate a 50th wedding anniversary on June 21st. And we came together. The idea that we were arranged marriage was very powerful to me. Something had come in and put it in motion, and we both said yes to it, even though we were scared to death. And we've held it together for 50 years. And any of those of you who are approaching anything like that know that it's work. It's a life's work. Two people together is work. And the great joy of that work is an idea of what it means to transition together over and over and over. Transition is everything. We were living in New York City. We had given birth to a little boy, Joshua. I'm now the associate curator of film at the Whitney Museum in New York. Life is perfect. Rudy dies. The impossible. My teacher's gone. What to do? Well, there were other people teaching, one of them in Indiana, and I went to the head of the Whitney Museum and said, I'm leaving. He thought I was mad, and I thought I was too. But I had a wife who was completely in support of that. And we transitioned to Bloomington, Indiana, to a little one-room apartment in an ashram, and gave 6 years of our life to something that everyone I knew thought I was mad to be doing. Why would I live in an ashram? Why would I give up a life at NBC? Why would I give up a life as a museum curator? Why would I do any of that? And I'll tell you why. Because nothing was more important than this thing in me that knew that transitioning, growing, evolving, moving beyond my comfort zone was at the core of who I was, even though I do not understand to this day how that person came into being. As I've gotten older, we have made lots of moves, lots of risky moves. We ended up, you know the story, in DeKalb, Illinois, where we decided to go so Blanche could teach at the university, Northern Illinois University. And I had nothing to do, but I ended up teaching public speaking, something about which I knew nothing, but seemed to be able to get a job. And we were there for 4 years, and I had a movie that I had written, actually got made in that time. And the film opened in LA, and Blanche and I borrowed money from everywhere to go to the premiere, and had lunch with a friend of mine who had been a roommate of many years ago, Brian De Palma. And Brian said, if you want to have a career in Hollywood, you got to be here. And we went back to DeKalb, Illinois, and Blanche, we took a picture of the house and little tags with a phone number, and Blanche put it up at the market across the street saying, we're moving. We're selling our house. We had nothing. We had nothing. All we would have was the money from the sale of the house. And we actually decided to move to Hollywood with nothing but 2 kids. Now 2 kids. Ari had been born. This is total madness. And if you want to see deep insecurity and discomfort, you should have watched me during that period. And you're a spiritual teacher of some kind, and yet you approach all of these transitions with terror, insecurity. We did not have enough money to live in Los Angeles. We borrowed a little money from my mother-in-law, and the sale of the house helped us a little bit. But we got to Los Angeles, and instantaneously the root system dug into the soil, and work started to happen, and the tree grew, our lives grew. It was really wonderful. And I had, if you will, made it, which was something I cannot even begin to understand what happened to this kid from Detroit. With nothing, no skills, no talents, nothing, just a strange kind of ambition. But we transitioned into this life, and then it really grew and expanded. And Blanche wanted to become a horseback rider, and we got horses, and then we needed more space, and we got a house on the East Coast, and then we sold the house on the East Coast and started following grandchildren, and then our grandchildren are now moving for the 3rd time to upstate New York, right where our old house used to be. And so we are transitioning yet again, letting go of the primary home in our lives, which was in Los Angeles, and a secondary home, which we've had here, which has proven to be close to one of the most perfect homes I've ever been in. And we're letting go of all of this stuff for something that is deeply unknown and does not present itself in some way as a step up or a step into anything other than something different. My experience in going through all this has been a constant. For every transition, it's called fear and doubt. And I have a bedrock that I married that keeps me whole while I go through all of this. The practice that I have taught you and that I have observed over 50 years is a profound gift in this process. But the thing you learn, and the thing I need to share with you, is that it's work. It's just work. And the work goes down to the very core of what Rudy taught, which was surrender. And the work of surrender, the work of letting go of all of your stuff, is the profound work of liberation and spiritual growth. Letting go of your stuff means literally having to let it go. Emotionally, physically, spiritually. You have to let go, because every bit of craving and holding on and grabbing of life will cause you ultimate suffering, because in the end it was never yours. In the end it was a temporary arrangement. It was there for the time being to enjoy and to love and to free yourself from it and move on. The extraordinary thing about spiritual evolution is that you don't always see what you're holding on to until it's being taken away. The great gift of transitioning in life is it's an awakening to the parts of you that are holding on. And you know they're holding on because they will become very sad and grieving about losing them. When you feel sadness and grief and anger and wishing it were otherwise, and all of the stuff that human beings do, the great lesson in all of that is you are being shown the very thing you need to work with. This is spiritual work. Spiritual work is seeing the attachment, and spiritual work is detaching, letting go, surrendering from the very thing that you have now witnessed as something you want. Most of us are unaware of how attached we are to permanence, to stability, to predictability. Most of us do not see it because it's not challenged by a transition. Most of us lock into certain lifestyles that will keep us going for a long period of time. And the middle of life is very much a expansion of enjoyment of the what is. But built into this system is this really remarkable thing called aging and dying, which we do not like to talk about very much, and which our culture really clearly does not focus on. The culture focuses on comfort, pain relief, getting things done, achieving, being celebrated, being acknowledged, being loved, all of these different things. But there comes a point where your utilitarian value to the culture, especially Western culture, is done. It's done. And now, the big transitions are coming in, but they have nothing on the other side that will reward you Like you can transition moving to Hollywood and suddenly have a Hollywood career. You can transition moving here or doing that and have something come to you because middle life offers opportunity like that. Old age, you transition into loss. Period. Now, the great difference between loss in the materialistic sense and loss in the spiritual sense is really, really important. Because loss in the material sense causes great suffering. And anyone who is alive, who begins to experience the loss of stuff, feels great sadness. Sometimes maybe you'll feel a little bit relieved to lose certain things or to give up certain things. There's a certain culture of letting go that really is simplifying and does bring pleasure. It's an enlightenment of sorts. Letting go of the excess baggage is actually a good thing. But then you get down to the fundamental stuff. And the fundamental stuff is both material, like your bed, the nightstand, the frying pan, the stuff that we use every day. But the real stuff that you start to let go of is the fact that when you get up out of bed in the morning, your body doesn't necessarily support you. For all your life, you got out of bed and you went somewhere. Suddenly, you go to get out of bed and it's really hard. And you go, huh. And you begin to realize the biology of you, the familiar biology, is really changing. Now, that can happen at any point in time, of course, but old age programs it in. It brings you into transitioning that does not have a particularly happy outcome in the mindset of your life. The idea of losing mobility, the idea of losing energy, the idea of losing certain kinds of comforts, the idea of arriving at things hurting, not sleeping, not having anything to do in your day. I mean, it goes on and on. The loss and the loss and the loss become a transition into something that is inevitable and deeply problematic. This is where a spiritual practice over the course of a lifetime becomes essential. Essential. Because everything it takes away is allowing something more to be present. Everything you lose from the material world lightens the load. And if you can be still-minded and open-hearted and quiet, you will start to feel the expansiveness of who and what you are. If you have been practicing this throughout your life, you will already know what I'm talking about. It is hard to begin this journey when you get old because the patterning is so strong. But if you can begin to practice early, you will discover this is why I practiced. This was the moment. You start to realize you are transitioning into nothing. Some of us have these experiences earlier, where you can call it intimations of nothing or awakening into nothingness. It is a huge affirmation of everything I'm talking about. It is an absolute transition into an awareness that makes you see the larger world and how you are everything and nothing simultaneously. Spiritual awakening is a gift of awareness that allows you to become aware of where you are and where you're going and what this is. But my experience has been, even in that awakened state, transitioning still occurs. And you may have a little bit of capacity to be appreciative of the new degree of loss and the new degree of change that is about to occur. or you may have to find old muscles that work through that stuff. Because it is one thing to know that yes, there is nothing, and it is another thing to really biologically become nothing. And that's really the final transition. You will biologically fail to exist anymore. What comes then? Well, a lot of people have thoughts and ideas and answers about what comes then. It may be, for those of us who have this awakened experience, a ongoing expansion of, I call it presence. I'm not the only one, but something that isn't really identified with the person, but is still somehow, as long as you're a human being, connected to the biological. Take away the biological, there's no certainty of anything. There is no certainty. But this is where, I guess, religious teaching comes in, or personal belief or faith comes in. What happens when that final transition arrives? Nobody knows. You can guess. You can project. Every religious teacher gives you answers. The heavens, the hells, the pure consciousness, the white light of reality. There's so many things. It will be really interesting to see. And if you have certainty about it, congratulations. We'll never find out if you were right. But here is my sense that we live in a manifested space that arrives from something wildly, improbably unmanifested, that forms through matter into dense form, and out of that dense form comes something we call love. Totally improbable. No way to understand it. It appears to happen in some timeless dimension, way beyond anything the mind can comprehend. It appears that there are universes upon universes upon universe, expanding and contracting, being born and dying, like a bubble bath of universes everywhere. And we appear in one here or maybe one there, and there may be beings that have been in them for eons of time who have appeared in so many different manifestations of universes. People talk about ascended beings, and Rudy said that the guys upstairs, and I talk about they're there doing this or doing that. Absolutely no proof of any of it. But my spiritual experience tells me that there are guys upstairs. My spiritual experience tells me that we are accountable for our lives. My spiritual experience tells me that these lives are in transition at all time, that they are in states of perpetual uncertainty, that we know nothing, but we are aware that somehow we have arrived in this manifested form for reasons beyond comprehension. But there is no question that we are here. There is no question that there's a chair here. Even though it may be molecules of stuff floating in space, it has solidity for me and is supporting this very temporary body with this very temporary mind and this temporary verbiage that keeps coming out. There is something going on here that is beyond understanding. And in the little glimpses that I've had through my meditation, through the LSD I took back in the 1960s, I knew that this horizontal and vertical universe that we live in, something that reaches into the infinite and something that expands beyond time and space. This universe is not a chance occurrence. We are here because we're here. And we have obligation or no obligation. Totally your call. But my sense of it, for whatever it's worth, is we are here because it wants us to be here and because we are accountable for our being. And we will be called into an account when it's over. Now, I could be wrong about that, in which case, why bother? Why bother being accountable? Why bother being a person in pursuit of something greater, kinder, more loving, more compassionate, more alive? Why bother to do any of that if it all ends up as nothing? But if it ends up that you are accountable and that you are part of some, who knows what you want to call it, grand design, something vast beyond understanding that gave you life and manages to give you breath and consciousness and awareness and feelings and emotions and fears and all of that. If perhaps that thing that has created this, perhaps if that thing has purpose and you are part of that purpose, and that purpose requires you to live in a particular way, and you are accountable, and they're right about that, better to do that than to live unconsciously, to live ignorantly, to live in a state of who cares, who gives a shit. Probably not a good choice if there's any possible truth to this. So if by some chance this all ends in a blackout, done forever, nothingness, okay. Then you've wasted your time being a good person. You've wasted your time being kind and compassionate and loving and sharing and opening spiritually and doing the dance of life. On the other hand, if this thing really is aware of you, holds you accountable, which also means loves you, guides you, roots for you, hopes for you, if there's that possibility, give yourself over to it. And let me tell you, it will make life happen in what will be called periods of transition. Risk transition, risk change, risk moving forward. You can always move forward again. Blanche keeps telling me regularly, as her battery and her hearing aid tells her that she's running out of battery, Blanche tells me regularly, we can always move again. We can always, if you don't like this place, we'll do another place. I don't sit like that. I'm always like, I'm here for the duration. But I know she's right. Transition is always, always possible. Transition not only is possible, it is inevitable, and we are all aiming at the last transition. Design your life accordingly. Participate in transition. Choose change if you can. For whatever it brings you will be enormously vibrant. You may feel deep grief and sadness and misery and all the things you don't want to feel, but trust me, you won't know about those things until you feel them. They are meant to be felt. They are meant to be experienced. We are going to live lives that ultimately call us into account and take everything away. And how do we respond to that? How do we respond to the final letting go? I really, at the age of 76, am now on the journey with a lot of my friends, and we talk about what it means day by day to let go. My friend Larry just had to buy a new car with a screen in the front because he can no longer turn his head back to park. He can't, his whole body, it's just too hard for him. This new car is like magical. And actually, he took me out the other day and the new car parked itself. I have never been in a new car that parked itself, but I realize transitions can bring gifts, and they also allow you to let go of old skills that you can no longer call upon. I often complain about the unknown. I often express fear of the uncertain. And my friend Bart always says, everything is unknown and everything is uncertain. I am reminded by people around me, like the woman walking through the airport who said, God exists, relax. Those pieces of information keep coming at me from a million different directions. I am also a voice that will try to throw some of this out to you. You can throw it out to everyone you know, and we all become helpers of one another in a world where nobody knows anything, really. Nobody, except we're all going to transition out of here. Some happen very quickly. Some get to stay around. You know, Catherine had this unbelievable experience where she could have been gone in an instant, and she's not gone. She's here. And that gift of life, of being, of continuing, makes it very clear how every moment is a celebration, if you will look at it that way. It's your job, and I'm talking to myself as well as to you, to keep this interesting, to keep it going. I know that I don't have anything to do once I get to New York, except once the house is set up. You know, I'm not great about running out and meeting people. I don't always know how to do that. I can be teacherly, but just going out and having a dialogue, bless you. I mean, half the guys I know from before there they're all hunters. I'm not a hunter. I don't like talking about killing deer. It doesn't do it for me. But there will be some people, something will come. I will have to redesign Bruce. I will have to redesign this person. I will create a house that will be wildly open to anybody, including every one of you, to come visit, because I will love and treasure your company. I know that this transition that's happening is the most difficult one yet, but what a training ground for the ones to come. I have a lot to learn, and I hope that I learn it, and I will share the stuff I learn. If it's redundant and you already know it, then just turn it out, tune it out. But if it's important, if it's valuable, and I can only tell you, being a few years ahead of you on this path to the ultimate transition, this journey is sometimes helpful to hear from other people who are ahead of you. In my parents' generation, nobody talked about aging and death. Nobody. It did not come up. My mother's only comment about being old was that she keeps busy. Her existential crisis was to paint. And she did it. And I was really, in a way, awed by that. But there's more to it. And if you keep your eyes open, you will see the human journey in your life. You will see the universal in the particular of who you are going through it. You are not the first person to transition out of this world. You are not the last person. Some people have one kind of transition, other people have others. Whatever it is, yours was the one you were supposed to have. Surrender. Thank you. Surrender. It will be sometimes a slow, unpleasant process. Surrender. Find the simple joy at the core. That's the great gift of what we have been taught in this spiritual practice. No matter how much you let go of, the thing that remains is yourself. You don't transition out of that, I don't think, ever. We shall see. This is the journey, guys. Transition is everything. Transition as often and as lovingly and as easily and as completely as you can. Open to newness, open to letting go, open to strangeness, open to surrender, open to moving on, because that's what we do as human beings, where we move on. Any questions?
It's not really a question. I just want to say that, you know, I'm overlaying the baby and the pregnancy, you know, onto, like, you know, which is a big gain. It's not much of a loss except for a certain amount of freedom. And I was following along quite nicely until you said, Lance said, if you don't like it, we'll just get another one.
Right. Well, it is additive in that way. That is how it works. No, the incredible thing about transitioning and having a child is it opens you up to a new depth of transitioning. It's no longer you yourself. You are now with other beings that are transitioning, and that larger journey is quite powerful. And there's a lot of risk and danger and fear that goes along with that. So if you want to really learn how to open your heart, it's an old line that I heard many years ago: having a baby is like taking your heart and putting it out of your body. You know, your heart is, you really start to feel what it is to be human, and the transitioning that takes place is no longer isolated in a singular form. It's all around you. That's part of it. It's really giant experience. Change, new life, the loss of life, all the stuff that can go on, all the hopes, ambitions, fears, all of that stuff, the richness, the density of that. It makes for great storytelling and great novels, but for a person's life, it's like hard. It's hard to live a full life with all of this stuff happening, and every one of us with these completely different stories, completely different, almost incomprehensibly different stories, and yet we all have to learn these universal truths. The universal truth is, this is temporary, it's moving on, enjoy it while you got it, and trust me, if you have the skill to enjoy it while you've got it, it changes everything. That's all I can tell you. My grandson spent two nights at our house this last week, and I wasn't going to let go of one drop of the joy that came in that moment. He provokes joy. His sister, who we don't see as often, provokes joy. You know, they're amazing beings, and I just figure, take it wherever it comes, and find it. And if you find no joy, risk the opportunity to find it somewhere else. Risk reaching out, finding new possibility. You know, I mean, that's a lesson for me as much as it is for anyone else. But it's something we have to do. And if life calls us into account, it says, okay, now you got nothing. That's a transition. Now you got nothing. What do you do? What do you do when you're at nothing and you're still here? I'll let you know more about that down the road, if that's my journey. You know, I mean, I won't have nothing, but I will have a life without a career, without the old accoutrements that were the definitions of my life. You take that away, take future away, other than dissolution. And what do you have? What's your present tense? How do you live that? You know, I think there are probably millions of people who have talked about this, and I don't think I'm necessarily more eloquent than anybody else, but at least I will share this journey in the spiritual sort of continuum, as though perhaps it will be helpful. And if it is, you can listen. If it's not, the real teacher is in you, not me. The real teacher is in you, and you'll learn all this stuff as you enter into that phase. But it's a great, powerful ride, and we're all on it, and it is fearsome, and it's beautiful. That's all I can say. It's got all of the ingredients. It's a whole life. And here we are. Anybody else?
I have a question about something that you haven't talked about a lot, but something that seems to be part of the Rudy paradigm, which is burning things up and consuming things as part of the transition process.
My experience is you don't have to add much to the fire of your own life. Stuff comes up. And it has to be, if you will, processed. And one of the ways of processing it is bringing it to light, bringing it into the space that you can be aware of it, which is often a space that is not comfortable. Trying to hide stuff, compartmentalize stuff, put it away somewhere to be dealt with later. Well, maybe for some people that there's a wisdom to that, but everything that's put away in the closet at some point has to come out, and it has to be dealt with. And you can burn it up. I mean, we're getting a dumpster next week in LA. We're taking a huge part of our past life and throwing it into this dumpster, which will be burned up or shredded, whatever they do to it. It is a process. of letting stuff go. The burning process is staying in the reality of that, in the pain of it, if you will, and saying, here you go, into the fire, into the fire, into the fire, and let it burn. You're not getting it back, and it's going to have heat, and it's going to be really uncomfortable. But that part of the journey is what's required if you're going to let go of the you that you think you are before it's time to be taken apart by the universe. If you can get rid of all of this, I won't call it false stuff, but all of the attachments and all of the drama and all of the stuff that's causing you to suffer, that kind of burning is very much at the core of a human experience. But don't burn for no purpose. Burn up the stuff. Burn this stuff away. Otherwise, you just suffer and burn to no end. You're like a fire consuming your happiness. You're a fire consuming your joy. You're a fire consuming all of the stuff in your life that is causing you suffering, and you can just keep suffering and burning like that. But constructive burning is pour it on, use the fuel, the flames, to burn all of your own suffering, to burn the stuff in you that's holding on, and find a release, find a freedom that comes from having burned it away. Whatever that may be. It is a metaphor Rudy used a lot. And he used it a lot because he suffered a lot. You know, he was a guy with a lot of stuff. And he in no way ran from his stuff. He just put it on. And out of the flames of Rudy's suffering, if you will, and he took on our suffering as well, which is one of the great things of a really good teacher, they take on your stuff and they burn it up and they hand you back quietude, simplicity, still pointedness. They have done you a favor. And that happens. It happens in this class. It's microscopic in many ways, but there's a lot of stuff, and almost every one of you, usually it is every one of you, hands over something that is blind spotted in you, that you don't see, but I can feel it. I go into your system and I go, ooh, there it is. You know, just like a guy who does active release therapy finds the little thing in you and pushes, and it really hurts for a minute, and then it's gone. This finds a way into you. It finds the place that goes, like I can tell that you've been sitting on this spot for eons, and it is really uncomfortable. And it's so uncomfortable, you circle it, you give it, you know, you harden it, you do all these things to give it calluses, but you don't take care of it. And so the spiritual effect of a teacher who is open and available and can work this is to go in and find that spot and extract it. I mean, there's a lot of things. You can do all sorts of things to a person's thick, dead space because they're so unconscious usually in that space. You can just go in and undo it, unlatch it, free it, let it out. Or whatever. I mean, there's a million metaphors for it because in some ways it's surgical, in some ways it's really a gentle kind of touch to something that needs to kind of get awakened again. And you see it, and you just do it. You just do it. And when you guys teach, and many of you are exquisite teachers and will be teachers, when you teach with another person and you sit quietly and you just feel that person as they feel themselves, you will go right to the place in them that goes, there's always that, don't, not that. That always is presented, always. You can find it very quickly. And go to that place and go, and they go, and take it out. Removed. They don't even know they've done it, but it's no longer functioning in them. You have just released a tension, a form, a construct that does not help that person. And you can do it week by week. You can extract these little things, and sometimes it's like a big operation, and sometimes it's a thing, and sometimes it's really, really microscopic, but it works. And not only do you have to be a teacher in the realm of spirituality, if you have any kind of normal human compassion and you're with somebody who is suffering, you will find a way to hold hands, to touch, to look, to embrace, to just listen to them. And this thing will start to, because of your attention and your presence and your energy, it will start to unravel, and they will speak it to you, or they will shift somehow in themselves, and this thing will go, and it's gone. Just because you were there. Because you were present with them. You allowed this hidden, dark, secretive, uncomfortable thing to release. And we do that for each other. We're all miracle workers in a way. We just don't always know we're miracle workers. But one of the great gifts of a spiritual practice is you service everyone because you are kind of led to do that or instructed to do that. I mean, occasionally when I'm in New York, I sit in this one coffee shop and people walk by the window all the time, and Blanche and I sit in this one booth, and all the time I'm eating breakfast, I'm working with these people walking down the street. I can feel it. I feel their burden. I just go, it's so painful and sometimes beautiful, and I don't know what I do. My consciousness goes inside, and it just pulls the string, changes the lever. It does something, and I know they just got this moment. And I don't need to be known for that. It's not even a gift, really. It's just something I think a lot of us do. If you're walking down the street and somebody's really in pain walking by you and your heart goes out to them, you're helping. You can be helping. Maybe there's a real big thing you can do, like buy them an ice cream sundae or give them a house to live in or something of that dimension. But mostly, we just give what we can, which is compassion and love and acknowledgement and recognition. And that's teacherly. That's human. That's what it means to be alive. And if we all did that for each other instead of hating each other and buying guns and thinking protecting me against you, that's where accountability really creates an enormous problem for people. Because if you've lived a life of hiding yourself from the world and protecting yourself against all others and wanting to kill and hate and all that, that's a burden beyond belief. And there are people who come here and live that. And if there's such a thing as karma, which may well be, you're going to have a long time to work with expiating those things that you have locked into such rigidity inside yourself that they create a crippled being. And most people that I know are in some ways crippled. And it's hard, sad to feel that you can only do so much to help them, but do that much. It's not that hard, and a lot of the time it's just a hug. Some people won't allow the hug. You know, if someone's tapping you on the back when you hug them, they're just saying, get away, get away, get away. You know, you don't want that kind of a hug. You want something real, or a look, or a handshake, or it doesn't matter. Or just a feeling that transmits itself. All of you are good at that. Everyone in this room, honestly, everyone who's sitting here is a gifted being. And I don't know if you all get how gifted you are, but I would walk away from this space, which I will be doing, knowing that every one of you can serve in my place. With as much capacity, evolving into whatever you truly need or want to become, you can serve other people. It's a choice. It's a risk. It's a transition. Do you want to move into being that as a visible being, or do you want to just be it without announcing it to the world? Yeah, that's fine. There's no role. Playing a role is not essential. It can actually create problems. But being a person who loves other people and who's kind to other people and who helps other people through their simple connection is a teacher and a gift. And I believe every one of you, and probably everyone listening to this talk, is that. And don't feel because you have fear or you have inhibition or you don't understand something or you're lesser than this or whatever. That is not a limitation. That's just, it's part of being human. Take a deep breath and find your way back to the simple core that is not locked into self-abnegation, that is not locked into self-judgment. Just breathe out of it and just be. Get back into this moment where there's no you, there's just being, and let that function. And do that regularly, and a spiritual practice will let you draw yourself back endlessly to the now, and then just function from there. It's not hard. It's not hard. It's just consciousness, knowing you can do it, and being inspired to do it, instead of, being inspired to watch, I don't know, Game of Thrones all day long. I haven't seen Game of Thrones, so maybe it's a great thing to do. But I'm just trying to give you that there are other things that are possible. And maybe you can do both, which would be great. Anybody else?
Bruce, you talked about transitioning into nothing, and I think in this maybe context you talked about passing on from the physical body, but Eckhart Tolle and other people talk about real consciousness coming from, I don't want to put quotes around in nothing to actually say it's nothing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a difference between biological nothing, physical death, let's say, and between the nothingness that the mind experiences by letting go of itself. When the mind enters into this vastness of present tense now, there is a creation of a spaciousness that is very hard to access with thought and mind at play. They can't really go there. The space is too refined, if you will, although it's not really, but it's just, it doesn't allow mindful, thoughtful process to enter. You have to just settle in. And it is a transition into, it's a great place to live from. And you have to do it regularly until you don't. But it is an enormous available space that you will discover that is a space of still pointed nothingness that precedes the final nothingness. It helps lead you to the final nothingness. It helps direct you to it. It is, I often call it navigational, this deep knowing that is just present in all of us. And if you pay attention, it leads and guides your life, and it allows you to fall back into periods of, if you will, comfort, acceptance, love, ease, beauty. And sometimes, if you go through periods of great transition, I can only talk for myself, it's getting back to that point takes practice, takes an effort, because you get thrown back into the miasma of the world, and then you have to go, whoa, and come back. I'm very grateful for that skill, because without that skill, it would be impossible to move forward. So it has been given. I didn't know, honestly, once this awakening took place for me 10 years ago, that I would ever get shaken up out of it. I thought that was over. But what I discovered, what I call is the shadows all started to show themselves. The stuff you didn't free yourself of, really. And that, to me, is the great gift of the endless transitioning, because the stuff you don't know about starts to show itself, and you have to work that, burn it, if you will, and you have to get through all of that stuff in order to return to what you always have been. The final version of that, it will not be all that different, I don't think. Unfortunately, I probably won't be able to come back from the other side to tell you if it was or wasn't, but what we have are teachers like Christ who have reportedly done that. So the good news probably is this practice endures beyond the physical. But even if it doesn't, it's great right now. It's great to fall back into yourself, to find the comfort of this space in you that will hold you even when it gets really shaky out there. And I am so grateful for that space in myself, even though there are days I'm just searching for it. And because it's like there's so much aggravation and stuff going on around me that I have to really work. And sometimes I just go for long walks, or I just sit in my chair, and then I go, okay, and you move on. You move on. This is the value of a life devoted to finding oneself. It helps. And I think will help more and more as you approach the big transition. Tim?
Gary, you're talking about letting go. I'm aware of, I keep thinking of the the image of a soft landing rather than crashing into the next unknown. Like I wanna have a plan, and I judge myself whether I have a good plan so I can safely go into that unknown of a major change, and I find, regret about times in the past when I didn't have a good plan and I did crash, and so all that stuff comes up as you were talking about letting go.
No, of course, it does, it
And
does.
that uncertainty thing, so what more might you say about that, being
Well,
with those attempts of trying to control this situation?
In a way, I'll just repeat myself, which is the ultimate knowing, the ultimate navigational awareness sits inside your chest, in your heart. It knows by feeling, it knows by intuition how to be, how to proceed. You have to feel it and you have to trust it. You have to get to a very subtle space because the mind will come in with a lot of noise, and that noise will drown out this very gentle knowing. But if you can become strongly engaged in this space, in yourself, this self of this being, you will begin to give it much more credibility, much more voice, much more power than you give your mind. And by doing that, you will find that it leads you in a place with great assurance and security, and you can trust it. When you have a great deal of trust in it, you will start to let go more gently of everything except certain things that you go, bah, like, I'll tell you where you get challenged the most. Letting go of your breath, or in a state of profound pain that won't go away. That's when this challenge really becomes hard and the mind starts screaming at you. And we're all going to have a moment like that. So preparing in some way to give yourself over as best you can to this final letting go is really great training. And many of us fail many times in life until we get it right. But once you start to get it right, it will work for you and it will undo all the old stuff. You will make peace with all the choices that were made through noisy mind and fear and inhibition and lack of trust and doubt. All of those things, you will go, of course, that's all I could do at that time. And then you start to have this profound forgiveness that goes out and acceptance, and that acceptance allows for much greater surrender. But it's a journey, and either you're on the journey or you're going to have to figure out how to do it in the last hours of your life. I've had to struggle for 50 years to do this. I can't imagine having 2 hours to work it out. Okay, guys, it's probably a long talk. But yeah.
I just wanted to thank you so much for coming today. And this talk is perfect.
Thank you for opening your house. This will be a classroom for people to come to for, I hope, a long time to come. I have said when I left New York that I would come back to New York to teach several times a year, which I did. I will try, even though I'm older and travel is less fun, to make my way back to Petaluma and to Oakland, thank you, and to give, to come every year and give talks. And so I will be back here and I will be in your house. And if there's other places at that point, that too. If you guys are still around, I will tell you, based on the quality of your sitting, you should make every effort to be around because you are gifts to yourself and you're gifts to the universe. You are profound gifts. That's all I can tell you. Make an effort to keep this alive because, boy oh boy, people will be benefited by being around you. So thank you, and thank you, Susan. And somewhere by the end of the year, maybe, I'll be back.